What did you say?
What did you say?
This is Daria Valkenburg. Do you have hearing loss? I do.
I am Annie Lee McDonald, and I have hearing loss, and I wear 2 hearing aids.
I'm deaf in my right ear. In this episode, we are joined by 2 special guests, our husbands, Elmer McDonald and Pieter Valkenburg. A person with hearing loss is not the only one that's affected in a family. Our children, our partners, our brothers and sisters, our parents also basically have a diagnosis of hearing loss because they have to live with us. We asked Elmer and Pieter to share a few experiences about living with wives who have hearing loss. Elmer agreed to speak first.
Well, I guess for my wife and I, it began right shortly after we were married. I was not familiar with this particular problem at all because I had never experienced anybody in my immediate family who had a hearing disability. But it was very early in our relationship that I discovered that Annie Lee was not interpreting sometimes what people were saying to her properly. And I was ending up speaking to her and saying, no, that's not exactly what they mean. So then very shortly after that, we made an appointment to go to Toronto so that she would have a hearing assessment and find out just exactly if there was a problem, and if there was a problem, could the problem be fixed. So we went to Toronto and had that appointment and met with the health practitioner, where she had a very exhaustive exam, and at that time determined that since she was born there was certain tones, if you like, that she had never ever heard. It was not within her capacity to hear these tones. So it very quickly became apparent that there were certain voice tones that Annie Lee was able to determine what people were saying, and there was other voice tones that she was totally impossible of being able to determine just exactly what they were saying. So right from there and on, I became the individual who, although I would be conducting a conversation with maybe somebody else, I was always aware of what Annie Lee was saying to somebody who she was having a conversation with, and I was always there to sort of hear what the conversation was about. Not that I was necessarily eavesdropping, because I was just nervous sometimes that Annie Lee was not going to interpret what the individual had intended the question to be.
Did you find that a strain?
No, our relationship is worthwhile, and both it's important to both of us. So if I can be of assistance to her, if we're in a crowded room, it's almost impossible for her to be able to get questions and carry on a conversation. So I'm better off if I'm not that far away from her, so that I can be a part of that conversation also.
Pieter, would you like to talk about your experience?
Yes, my experience is basically I never grew up with anybody who had a loss of hearing, so I wasn't aware of it. I found out pretty soon after we met that yes, you had a problem. It was a genetic problem. It was what they call an acoustic neuroma, and it was on a hearing nerve. It affected your hearing because basically you could only hear out of one ear. And up till today, I still quite often have to guess which ear it is. So if I go to a restaurant, do I have to sit on the left or on the right? And in this case, it is, as far as I know, it is the right ear that is affected, and the left ear is not affected. An example of that is that if we go to bed and in the morning I get woken up by crows in the backyard because the window is open, Daria is sleeping on her good ear, so her right ear, which is deaf, is exposed. She doesn't hear anything. I said, "Did you hear those crows? They woke me up this morning." And she said, "No, I didn't hear anything. It is fine. Anywhere we go, we have to make sure that I sit on the right side, or if you go in a restaurant and you're sitting with multiple people, you have to decide which side you want to sit. You go for booths because that is sort of enclosed environment and you don't get affected by the other people in the restaurant. And if you're sitting at a bigger table, you also want to have a wall in the back of you. So that's basically my experience with your hearing loss.
And do you find it a strain having to live with somebody with hearing loss?
I wouldn't call it a strain, but sometimes it's, I would say, it's a nuisance. It is like I'm sitting in the kitchen shouting my head off, trying to get your attention, and then you're sitting in the living room and saying, "What? What? What?" I then realize again that you have got hearing loss, but even after all those years of marriage, it doesn't register with me. And I sometimes have the idea that if you are sitting at a computer that you are just ignoring me. And it's got nothing to do with hearing loss.
Elmer, would you like to comment?
It's called selective hearing, Elmer.
No, I can't say that I've been too involved with selective hearing. We may accuse each other of that at some time, but mostly it's in humor.
Do you gentlemen feel like you're part of a special club?
No.
Not really.
No.
Well, my involvement with EPI, of course, EPI is a special club. And my involvement in there, yes, there are certain things we do to draw attention to the rest of the people that hearing loss is not just within the household. Hearing loss is out there. People who don't admit that they have hearing loss don't do themselves a favor, because quite often if you don't tell people that you have hearing loss, people think that you might have a form of dementia because you talk to them and they don't answer back.
Elmer, do you have anything you want to add?
I think with all of the situations in the world and all the various trials and tribulations that individuals are going through in an attempt to survive, is really not a big issue.
This was quite an eye-opening experience to hear what our husbands had to say, and we thank them for their candor. 4 key points were brought out. Number 1, having a partner with hearing loss is not necessarily a strain, but can sometimes be a nuisance when trying to communicate. Number 2, our partners do their best to support and accommodate us, especially in social situations where noise may make it difficult to hear. Number 3, even after decades of marriage, it can be a challenge to remember which is the better ear for hearing. And number 4, a sense of humor helps any relationship. Do you have a tip or story that you want to share? Email us at hearpei@gmail.com. That's hearpei@gmail.com. Catch you next time. This podcast was sponsored by a grant from Resource Abilities with excellent technical production by Wendy Natras. We hope you enjoyed this podcast and have learned some new tips and tricks for hearing loss accessibility.
In today's world, you're hearing all kinds of sounds, and you must have coping strategies to be able to hear what you want to hear and be able to put in the background what you don't want to hear.
Join us on our next podcast of What Did You Say?
What did you say?